The Curse of the O'Sullivans. The O'Sullivans had heard the rumors about the old house before they moved in, but they didn't believe in curses. They thought that they were just stories that people told to scare each other, but as they settled into their new home, they began to experience strange and terrifying events. At first, it was just small things. Objects moving on their own, doors opening and closing by themselves, strange noises in the night. But as the days went on, the occurrences became more intense and terrifying. The O'Sullivans began to see apparitions of previous owners of the house, all of whom had suffered horrific fates. The family tried to leave the house, but they found that they were trapped. The doors wouldn't budge, and the windows wouldn't open. It was as if the house was alive and didn't want to let them go. As the curse of the O'Sullivans intensified, family members began to disappear one by one, each falling victim to the same fate as those who had lived in the house before them. The remaining family members knew that they had to find a way to break the curse before it was too late. They began to research the history of the house and discovered a dark secret. The house had been built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of those who had been disturbed were angry and vengeful. With this knowledge, the O'Sullivans devised a plan to perform a ritual to appease the spirits and break the curse. It was a risky plan, but they knew they had no other choice. As they performed the ritual, the house began to shake and tremble, and the spirits of the dead began to scream in anger. But in the end, the ritual worked, and the curse was broken. The O'Sullivans were able to leave the house and start anew, but they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had experienced. They knew that they had been lucky to survive, and they knew that they would always be haunted by the memory of the cursed house. Years went by, and the O'Sullivans had put the cursed house behind them. They had moved to a new town, bought a new home, and had even started a new family, but they could never quite shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was following them. One day, while walking through their new town, they came across a familiar sight. The old house that had once been their home. It was still standing, but it looked even more decrepit and foreboding than before. Despite their better judgment, the O'Sullivans decided to investigate. They made their way inside, and as they did, they felt a familiar sense of dread wash over them. The house was just as they remembered it, dark, cold, and filled with a sense of malevolence. As they explored, they began to notice strange markings on the walls, symbols that they didn't recognize. They followed the trail of symbols up to the attic, where they discovered something that made their blood run cold. There, in the same spot where Tommy had found the secret room, was a small altar. On the altar sat a strange, black book, bound in leather, with the same symbols etched onto the cover. They opened the book, and as they read the ancient text, they realized that the curse had not been broken after all. They had only temporarily appeased the spirits, and now the curse had returned, stronger than ever. They knew that they had to act fast if they wanted to survive. They gathered the book and the symbols and rushed out of the house. But as they did, they heard something following them. It was the ghost of the little girl, the same one who had haunted Tommy so many years ago. She was angry, vengeful, and determined to keep the O'Sullivans trapped in the cursed house forever. They ran as fast as they could, but it was no use. The ghost was too fast, too powerful, and so, as they huddled together in terror, the ghost closed in, ready to claim its next victims. The curse of the O'Sullivans had returned, and it would never be broken. The dolls in the basement. When Sari inherits her grandmother's old house, she discovers a collection of antique dolls in the basement. But as she begins to clean them, she realizes that they're alive. They move and whisper to her. And Sari soon learns that they were made by a vengeful Dollmaker who cursed them to life. As she tries to break the curse, she discovers that the dolls will do it. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. The dolls, once still and lifeless, were now moving on their own. She felt a chill run down her spine as she watched their porcelain faces twist into sinister expressions. She tried to run, but it was too late. The dolls had already locked the basement door behind her. As Sarah frantically searched for a way out, she heard a soft whisper. It was coming from one of the dolls, and it was getting louder. She tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The voice was urging her to stay and play with them forever. Sarah knew that she had to break the curse and escape before it was too late. She searched through her grandmother's old things, hoping to find a clue to the Dollmaker's identity. As she dug deeper, she discovered a secret room that her grandmother had kept hidden for years. Inside, she found a journal filled with disturbing sketches and notes about the dolls. Sari read through the journal and learned that the Dollmaker had been driven mad by his own creations. He had cursed them to life and trapped them in the basement. but he had also left a way to break the curse. Sarah had to find a special key hidden within the dolls and use it to unlock the basement door. With trembling hands, Sarah searched through the dolls, hoping to find the key, but the dolls were onto her plan, and they weren't going to let her escape so easily. They began to move faster and more aggressively, determined to keep Sarah trapped with them forever. Sarah felt a moment of panic wash over her, but then she remembered her grandmother's words. "Never give up," she had said. "If you believe in yourself, you can overcome anything." With renewed determination, Sarah continued to search for the key. And finally, after what felt like hours, she found it. The dolls let out a piercing scream as Sarah unlocked the door and ran up the stairs to safety. But the dolls were not done yet. As Sarah fled the house, she could hear their tiny footsteps following her. She knew that she had to destroy them before they could harm anyone else. Sarah grabbed a shovel and returned to the basement. She smashed each of the dolls, one by one, until they were nothing but shattered pieces. And as she stood there, surrounded by the wreckage, she realized that she had broken the curse and freed the dolls from their torment. But Sarah knew that the memories of the terrifying night would stay with her forever. The dolls in the basement would always haunt her dreams, a reminder of the horrors that can lurk in even the most innocent of objects. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. She couldn't just leave the dolls down there, but she couldn't risk taking them with her either. She remembered a story her grandmother had told her about a powerful sorceress who lived in the nearby woods. After hours of walking through the dark, dense forest, Sarah finally stumbled upon a small cottage. The door creaked open when she knocked, and an old woman with piercing green eyes greeted her. "I know why you've come," the sorceress said, without Sarah even having to explain. "But you must know that breaking the curse won't be easy." Sarah begged the sorceress to help her, and after much persuasion, the sorceress finally agreed. She gave Sarah a small vial of a dark, thick liquid, warning her that it would only work if the dolls were all destroyed at the same time. Sarah knew what she had to do. With shaking hands, Sarah descended the stairs to the basement, clutching the vial tightly. The doll's eyes followed her every move. But Sarah didn't falter. She set the vial down and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered as she lit a match and dropped it onto the dolls. The basement erupted into flames, and Sarah ran out of the house, tears streaming down her face. Days later, Sarah received a package in the mail. Inside was a note from the sorceress congratulating her on breaking the curse, and a single doll made of pure gold. Sarah knew she would never forget the horrors she had faced in that old house, but the gold doll brought her some solace. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of hope. The ghost in the attic. Tommy had always been an adventurous kid, so when his family moved into the old Victorian house on Elm Street, he was excited to explore every nook and cranny. It wasn't long before he found the hidden door in the attic that led to a secret room. Tommy was thrilled. He had his very own secret hide-it, and he spent every spare moment there. But as he spent more time in the room, strange things began to happen. He would hear whispers and footsteps, and sometimes he would feel a cold breeze even though the windows were closed. One day, as Tommy was sitting in the room, he saw a figure out of the corner of his eye. He turned, but there was no one there. He tried to brush it off as his imagination, but the figure kept appearing, always just out of reach. Eventually, Tommy realized that the figure was the ghost of a young girl. She appeared to him night after night, and he could feel her pain and fear. He knew he had to help her, but he didn't know how. Through a series of clues and eerie encounters, Tommy uncovered the truth behind the young girl's death. She had been murdered in the secret room decades ago, and her killer had never been caught. With the help of the ghost and a few friends, they pieced together the clues and found the killer's identity. But the killer was still alive, and he knew that Tommy was getting too close to the truth. In a dramatic showdown in the attic, Tommy and the ghost confronted the killer. In the end, justice was served, and the ghost was finally at peace. Tommy never forgot the ghost in the attic. He knew that he had been given a second chance at life, and he vowed to use it to help others. But he also knew that there was darkness in the world, and it was up to him to face it head-on. Years passed, and Tommy grew up to be a successful detective. He had a reputation for solving some of the toughest cases in the city, but deep down, he knew that it was the ghost in the attic who had set him on this path. One night, Tommy received a call from an old friend. There had been a string of murders in the same neighborhood where Tommy had grown up, and the police were stumped. Tommy knew that he had to help. As he began to investigate, Tommy realized that the killer was using the same methods as the one who had murdered the ghost in the attic all those years ago. He knew that he was in danger, but he also knew that he couldn't back down. The closer Tommy got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. The killer was smart and elusive, always one step ahead of him. But Tommy refused to give up even when the killer began to target his family and friends. In a final showdown, Tommy faced off against the killer in the attic of his childhood home. It was a brutal and bloody fight, but in the end Tommy emerged victorious. The killer was dead and Tommy finally had closure for the ghost in the attic. As he left the house, Tommy knew that he would never forget the lessons he had learned. He had faced his demons head-on, and he had emerged strong and more determined than ever, and he knew that as long as he lived, he would never stop fighting for justice, no matter how dark the shadows may be. The Haunted Piano. When renowned pianist Rebecca moves into the old house that time forgot, she thinks she's found the perfect place to practice. But as she plays the piano, she realizes that she's not alone. The ghost of a former owner appears to her, and Rebecca soon learns that he was murdered in the very same room she's playing in. As she tries to uncover the truth behind his death, she realizes that the piano itself may be haunted. The notes she plays seem to have a life of their own, and Rebecca can't shake the feeling that the piano is trying to communicate something to her. As the hunting grows more intense, Rebecca becomes obsessed with the piano and the ghostly presence that surrounds it. She begins to research the history of the house and the piano, and discovers that the previous owners all suffered mysterious deaths. The piano seems to have a malevolent energy that draws out the worst in people. As she delves deeper into the piano's past, Rebecca realizes that she may be in danger. As the hunting reaches its climax, Rebecca finds herself in a battle for her life against the vengeful spirit of the former owner and the cursed piano. Rebecca knows she must act quickly to protect herself from the malevolent energy of the piano. She hires a paranormal investigator who confirms her worst fears. The piano is indeed cursed by an evil spirit that feeds on the life force of those who play it. Together, Rebecca and the investigator attempt to break the curse, but their efforts only seem to wing the ghostly presence. The haunting grows more intense, and soon Rebecca's life is in grave danger. In a final, desperate attempt to break the curse, Rebecca plays a haunting melody on the piano, drawing the spirit out of hiding. As the ghostly presence manifests before her, Rebecca confronts it head-on, using the power of music to battle the malevolent energy. In a moment of triumph, the curse is finally lifted, and the ghostly presence dissipates into the ether. The piano falls silent, and Rebecca is left to reflect on the horrors she has endured. From that day on, Rebecca can never play the piano again. The haunting has left an indelible mark on her soul, and she knows she can never forget the terrifying experience of the haunted piano. But she takes comfort in the knowledge she has finally broken the curse and put the ghost to rest. The shadows within. The Carter family had always dreamed of owning a big, beautiful house in the countryside. So, when they stumbled upon the old house that time forgot, they knew it was meant to be. The house was a grand old mansion, with high ceilings, ornate decorations, and a sprawling yard. It was perfect. But as they settled in, strange things began to happen. The shadows on the walls seemed to move. Even when there was no one in the room at night, they heard whispers in the hallways and footsteps on the stairs. The family tried to ignore it, but it was impossible to deny that something was wrong. As they began to uncover the house's secrets, they realized that it had a dark past. A family had lived there many years ago, and something terrible had happened to them. The shadows they saw were the ghosts of the family members trapped in the house for all eternity. As the Carter family delved deeper into the house's history, they found out that the family had been murdered by their own father. He had gone insane and had killed them all before taking his own life. And now their ghost haunted the house, unable to move on. The Carter family tried to leave, but the house wouldn't let them. Every time they tried to leave, the doors would lock, and they would be trapped inside. The shadows grew more aggressive, and soon they were attacking the family. In the end, the Carter family realized that the only way to escape was to confront the ghost head-on. They gathered in the living room where the murders had taken place, and performed a ritual to release the ghost from the house. As they did, the shadows dissipated, and the family was finally free. But the memory of the shadows haunted them for years to come. They never forgot the terror they had experienced in that house, and they knew that they could never truly escape the shadows within. Despite their ordeal, the Carter family tried their best to move on from the haunted house. They eventually found a new home far away from the old mansion and tried to forget everything that had happened to them. However, it wasn't long before strange things started happening again. The shadows that had haunted them in the old house began to appear in their new home. At first, they tried to ignore them, but soon they realized that the ghost of the murdered family had followed them. The Carter family was terrified. They couldn't escape the shadows no matter where they went. They tried to seek help from paranormal investigators, but nothing seemed to work. The ghosts were too strong and they seemed to feed on the family's fear. One day, they received a mysterious package in the mail. Inside was a letter and an old key. The letter explained that the key was for a storage room in the old mansion. It said the only way to stop the ghost was to find the object that had been cursed and hidden in that room. Despite their fear, the family knew they had to go back to the old house. They drove there in the dead of night and entered the storage room with the key. There, they found an old book with strange markings on the cover. It was the cursed object. With shaking hands, they opened the book and began to read the ancient incantation inside. Suddenly, a bright light filled the room, and the ghost appeared before them. But this time they were different. They were no longer shadows, but fully formed apparitions. The ghost told the Carter family that they had been cursed by a powerful witch who had lived in the area centuries ago. She had cursed the mansion and all who lived in it, and the only way to break the curse was to destroy the cursed object. The family burned the cursed book, and with it, the curse was lifted. The ghosts of the murdered family were finally at peace, and the Carter family never saw the shadows again. But they knew that they could never forget the horror they had experienced. The shadows within would always haunt them, a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the most unexpected places.